Namaste and welcome to Urban Chatterati. This is Abhinav Prakash. And today I'm joined by Alexi Arora, who is an Indian based out of a Western country who does not want to be identified in public because, as we know, that in the Western countries it has become impossible to speak your mind, to express yourself freely because of the dominance of this woke ideas and the cancel culture. It might harm your career progression and also your education in the Western country these days. But Alexei is a brave voice. He comes from the left side of the political spectrum, and he also runs a Substack where he has been criticizing the left wing, the so-called left wing politics in the advanced Western countries and also in India. So Alexei, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Mr. Prakash. How are you doing?
All good. Hope everything is well. So don't worry, no one is going to reveal your identity. That's not going to happen. But let's start from here itself. Imagine hiding your identity if you want to speak about the politics in America or let's say UK or any of the Western countries these days. What is this wokeness all about? What is this politics of wokeness in Western countries?
So wokeness is this sort of new sort of ideology that the American elite has adopted, which essentially allows them to masquerade as saviors of people all around the world. They know what is good for you and so on. And this ideology is especially prevalent amongst, like I said, the American elite and the people who wish to join the American elite. Now, this is also prevalent not only in America, like I am sure you can see it is prevalent in India as well. It's prevalent also in a lot of places in Europe, because this is, it's prevalent in these places because the people who use this ideology see themselves as part of the cultural wing of the American empire. They relate to its sort of news, they relate to its happenings, and they relate to its political icons. It reminds me of this one tweet by Farhan Akhtar, who was like, we have a vice president in US and you have the Speaker of the House, both are females, standing next to Joe Biden speaking on his State of the Union address. But he doesn't care to mention that we've had Indira Gandhi, Mayawati, and, all of these, great women who have led this country. So it's obviously an ideology that is not rooted in your own country. It is rooted to be servile to the American state and to its own sort of agenda. Now, this is something that has been opposed, obviously, by many on the American right. But the issue about the American right is that they support the very corporations that are pushing wokeness. So their sort of defense against wokeness is very futile, because on one hand they're saying, these corporations are woke, etc., etc. We will boycott them, and then the next thing they're doing is, we need to give them tax cuts and all that kind of nonsense. And it's a mixture of It's actually the end result of neoliberal ideology. And what is neoliberal ideology? It is social progressivism and economic deregulation and privatization. Those are two wings of neoliberalism. It was sort of as a compromise to the left, saying that, we will take care of your LGBT rights and all that kind of stuff, promise you freedom, social freedom, open borders. Just let us, ship the jobs away. We will give you free cheap consumer products from China and so on. So that's essentially what it is. Now, why this wokeness has emerged is something that I am currently looking into, looking at the philosophical reasons, looking at the, what sort of time frame it has occurred and why it has occurred in this particular time frame. But it is essential to understand that any ideology that is coming out of America is not in any way organic. It is completely a state-sanctioned ideology, because the American universities are funded by grants, and those grants are not given by the Department of Education. They are given by the Pentagon. The Defense Department gives you the grants for education in America. So all these universities that have these grants have actually gotten these grants from, the Pentagon and the American military-industrial complex.
Really? How does that work? Because we see that lots of private people, companies, and corporations who also give grants.
Yeah, obviously, I'm not saying they don't, but for example, billions of dollars, you would not see any corporation giving billions of dollars to a university. It is the state that can do that. So that is what I'm saying. The ideology of wokeness is coming from the American elite. It is the ideology of the American elite. It is not some organic belief that has been co-opted by them. It was made by them specifically to rebrand their empire. And it is, in fact, the logical conclusion of American liberalism and capitalism together. But you will see this very much. I think 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, CIA came out with this video of, how this Mexican lady working for the CIA is, she's bisexual and she's like, I'm a daughter of an immigrant and all that kind of woke stuff. And you're seeing this from CIA. And the funniest thing was all these left-wing people on Twitter saying, oh, they're just co-opting our ideology. They don't really mean it. And it was so funny watching them, cope with this fact that their very ideology they support was created by the Pentagon. So, but it's an interesting thing to notice why specifically this form of ideology, why wokeness? Why not anything else? Why not what China is doing? China is not doing wokeness. They have a national revival project and, very strongly nationalist culture. Why doesn't this exist in America? Well, simple, because this is the natural conclusion of liberalism and capitalism. Now, liberalism is an ideology that wishes to enforce freedom by any means necessary upon individuals. You must be free. That is the sort of doctrine of liberalism. What this means is the desire to atomize individuals, and especially under the current economy, atomizing individuals and breaking their traditional social bonds leads to commoditization. So freedom, so-called freedom under the current economy, is your culture being commoditized. That is essentially what it is. If you look at, for example, a lot of people who are on the left of the side of the left wing in America, they're shouting slogans like, we support open borders, all migrants can come into America, no big deal. We support abolishing the family and all this kind of wild stuff that you would not associate with any sane political opinion. But why do they support it? Because the left in America are the foot soldiers of capitalism. They don't realize it. They're useful idiots for it, because their coalition in America is Silicon Valley. That is their main sort of coalition partner. When the Black Lives Matter protests were going on in last summer in America, the people who were supporting it the most were corporations, which is a very odd thing to see if your ideology is supposedly challenging the elite. But like we know, it is not challenging the elite. The ideology is of the elite. It's just that the left doesn't know it or are willfully ignorant of the fact. So, like I said, this ideology seeks to atomize individuals. And once you can break away your traditional bonds, you do not have time to focus on things that matter. For example, if a woman is spending 1 hour at home with her child, helping raise her child, versus spending one more extra hour at work, which one would capitalism normally choose to be a better option for itself? It would choose the mother at work, which is essentially what this. If you understand what this means, it means abolish the family, but who benefits from it? It is these very oligarchs in America who benefit from it, because it means you don't have time to do anything else. You either are working or you are consuming their product, which is essentially what it is. So wokeness is this sort of ideology that helps sort of grease the way forward to this kind of future, which is techno-feudalism, where a handful of elites, 1% control everything, and we are left with low social mobility. And this is kind of the path that we have been witnessing in America ever since Ronald Reagan came into power. So Ronald Reagan came into power. He said, free trade is good, free markets, privatize everything. What does that lead to? It leads to all the factories moving to China, leads to all the factories moving to Mexico. The working class Americans are fed with opioid drugs, leading to almost 500,000 deaths of despair. So, and every normal American basically does not have the necessary means to have upward social mobility, upward economic mobility as well. So this is where you see the sort of rise of wokeness. And this was exceptionally prevalent after the 2008 financial crash, because we saw with it in America the Occupy Wall Street movement, which was very, this was on the left, obviously, but on the right as well was the Tea Party movement. Both movements were very class-based, and they were very keen on challenging the supremacy of the elite. So obviously, if you look at all the articles and the percentage of articles mentioning racism, structural racism, white supremacy, all those kind of folk buzzwords, they significantly increased after the 2008 crash, because it was meant to divide the people's attention from economy towards this sort of culture war. So the people who sort of fell for this the most were college graduates who did not have the ability to get the jobs they wanted with their college degree. So this is why they are talking about, those poor white trash, those deplorable Trump voters, or like, the poor whites have privilege over black rich people and so on, because this is a sort of signaling saying that, I can use this language to get in the elite, while at the same time throwing the poor guy under the bus. It is meant to assert your own class position within society.
So basically, we used to hear white trash. Now that white trash has become white privilege.
Exactly. It is just another way of doing racism, but this one is much more socially acceptable now.
Yeah, but Alexei, you have pointed out racism. So, and you also pointed about these corporations who are speaking woke language and who are promoting these ideas.
Yes.
What is the relation between the race politics in the Western countries these days and the neoliberal politics or this techno-feudalism, as you have talked about?
Yeah, so like I said, ever since we have had Reagan and Thatcher, the desire by the rich sort of elite has been to accumulate more and more wealth for itself. And we can see this with the sort of, if you look at the graph of average employee to CEO pay, when Reagan was leaving office, so when Reagan was entering office, this ratio was for every $1 the employee earns, the boss earns $22. Now the ratio is for every $1 the employee earns, the employer, the boss, earns $327. This has been the staggering inequality that America has seen. And obviously, when you don't have the jobs you need to give these people, especially those who do not have college degrees, this was the first people who were affected by this neoliberal push, because it was the industrial jobs, the steel jobs, the manufacturing jobs that were exported to China, right? And these people were the first affected. And so they couldn't really fight back all that much because Reagan went hard against the unions. And essentially, with the 2008 financial crisis, you had, like I said, the push for anti-racism to distract from income and wealth inequality. And like I said, this was being accepted by those who wanted to be part of the elite and so they could redeem themselves using this sort of culture of the elite. And I put out a tweet a couple of days ago. It was basically white privilege discourse is used by that mediocre white person who sees himself as equivalent to, George Washington or Franklin Delano Roosevelt or Abraham Lincoln. But he sees himself as equivalent to that, which is why he says, I have white privilege at the same level as George Washington, who owned slaves. But at the same time, they use it to, attack the poor white guy and say that, he is white trash and deplorable. So this sort of ideology is actually meant to assert the social inequalities. It is meant to keep them at bay. And at the same time, as and when it advances, the intensity of it advances, you can see that the material benefits of being an American worker are declining. Because the more you need to signal that you're above everyone else, the more you don't have the money to signal that you're above everyone else.
That's a fair point, but we have also seen the emergence of the big tech companies, and you have this techno-feudalism, a new tech aristocracy, and America is the center of this the home base of this new tech aristocracy, which is challenging the state power everywhere in the world. So you have China, where the state can crush these tech tycoons. Then you have America, where the tech aristocracy can ban the president of America himself. So what's happening out there?
Yeah. So, like I said, why this is happening in America is because of the ideology of liberalism. Why this is not happening in China is because China is not a liberal country. So in America, private corporations do not come under the First Amendment, which is the freedom of speech and all of the kind of stuff. So the freedom of speech maintained by Twitter is by the definition of Twitter itself. So it does not have the constitutional right to have everyone on its platform, no matter what they say. It can basically kick anyone out and nobody can do anything about it, which is what happened because you had these Republicans were complaining, you kicked Trump out of Twitter. But again, what are they doing? They're saying, tax cuts are great. We must do tax cuts and all of that stuff. So again, the ideology of the American right is wedded to liberalism. They support the economic ideology, which opposes their culture. Well, at the same time, for the left, they support the culture of an economic ideology they claim to oppose. So you see how both are basically useful idiots of the big tech and the big banks in America, because they know, I will give you some LGBT flag for you. I will talk about freedom to the other side and, voila, tax cuts and more government subsidies for me. So that's essentially the case. Now, why this is not happening in China is because China is not a liberal state. I see a lot of people on the right, especially, people like Jordan Peterson, who is, to be very honest with you, I like his psychology work, but I don't think he has anything of value to say when it comes to politics. And his psychology is great. I recommend people read his book, but I don't agree with his politics. He said this is cultural Marxism and all that stuff. So, well, tell me, why is there no cultural Marxism in China, a communist country? Why is there no cultural Marxism in Vietnam? Because there is no such thing as cultural Marxism. This is the logical conclusion of American liberalism and American capitalism. This is happening in Western liberal democracies. It's not even happening in post-communist Russia. It is not happening in Eastern Europe. They're trying to do it. George Soros and, the European Union are trying to do it in Poland and Hungary. But Hungary, it's not happening because Viktor Orban, their leader, he is not a liberal. He's elected in liberal democracy, but he does not respect liberalism. He does not, for example, while the rest of Europe was accepting migrants, Hungary says, we're not going to do it. Do whatever you want. And he has good approval rating. At the same time, if you look at Poland, also in the European Union, also in NATO, but their ruling party is not a liberal party. Their party is a right-wing party, but they realize that the neoliberal ideology has gone so far off the course, and they realize how it can damage their own cultural values, that economically, they're actually much to the left of Bernie Sanders in America.
Are you seeing the same thing in India? Because, we have this infiltration of woke ideas in India. We see them in the universities. We see them on Twitter. We see them in all this kind of cultural events these days. But your ruling party is not a liberal party in that sense.
Yes.
It's a right-wing party, but again, on the left side spectrum of the likes of Bernie Sanders and all those people.
Yes.
How do you see India, this whole thing about appeal of wokeism in India, and then a party which is winning election is not a woke party?
Yeah, so I think wokeism is a very sort of new phenomena in India because this is especially increased after 2016 when, Trump got elected and our own elites were saying, oh, no, Trump is bad, and so on. So they accepted the wokeness that was being fed to them from American mainstream media. And so they itself became woke because this was the ideology of American empire. Obviously, BJP is not a woke party. The good thing about them is that they have an alternate cultural vision to the woke. Their culture is not so commoditized. Modi is building Ram Mandir. That has nothing to do with capitalism in any way. That is just, pure dharma. So in that sense, obviously, the BJP has the cultural vision to challenge wokeness. And it is a credible cultural vision that appeals to the subaltern classes of India. And it even appeals to sort of the middle class and, upper middle class as well, because Indians are religious. Indians care about their gods, their culture, and so on. So in that sense, I think he's doing a great job. But when it comes to a lot of the Indian right in general, Modi, for example, has expanded the welfare state significantly more than the Congress party, which is very ironic for a right-wing party to do if the party is supposedly right-wing. But I think the people who are on the right, especially on Twitter, big so-called pundits and so on, and they are calling for privatization. Now, obviously, there are some things we must privatize. Like, I don't think the government should make condoms. That is a completely stupid thing to make. The government should not spend taxpayer money making something that is not necessary because it is a consumer product. But privatizing, for example, they're calling for privatizing essential state-owned enterprises. Now, if you privatize these with Western capital, the very corporations in America who are pushing this ideology will push this ideology in your country too. They're doing it. I think there was a couple of days ago, I saw this graphic about, there was the French car manufacturer Renault, and they were celebrating Pride Month by changing their profile picture on Instagram with the LGBT flag and their logo on it. India was one country that did it. They did not do this in Vietnam, which is a communist country. They did not do this in Russia. They did not do this in Morocco. So it is pretty evident that these people, for them, this wokeness is the legitimizing ideology of Western capitalism. Now, I'm not saying India should not be a capitalist country. We are a semi-feudal country. We have one foot in capitalism and one foot in backward feudalism. So obviously, we should embrace capitalism, but the right kind of capitalism, because we need to grow, but we do not wish to be colonized at the same time.
What is this right kind of capitalism? That's a very strong word you have used, Alexei.
So if you look at countries like Vietnam, if you look at countries like Singapore, you look at countries like Taiwan or even South Korea, that, in my view, is the right form of capitalism. It is where we have a strong state.
Yeah, you mean more of a mercantilist policy, mercantilist state?
Sort of, because mercantilism has different forms as well, but what you need is a very strong state. You need a very strong state to guide the markets towards the optimum outcome for the nation, which is, for example, South Korea, we have Samsung, and it's a very rich country, grew at like 12% every year during its heyday of growth. How did South Korea do it? Now, if I give you this answer, a lot of your sort of right-wing viewers might find it surprising because they nationalized all the banks and they did 5-year plans, which is something you expect from a socialist country, but they did it because they found the right balance between left-wing sort of statist model and the right-wing markets. We also need to find the balance between both models, in my view, because Singapore has done the same. They created sovereign wealth funds and Singapore Airlines, MediaCorp, and a lot of state-owned enterprises. Taiwan also did the same thing. Vietnam is doing the same thing. South Korea did the same thing. And actually, the only reason China grew is because it also did the same thing. So it managed its globalization very effectively, but we have to see, are we managing our globalization effectively? I'm not against markets. India is in a current state where you need to expand capitalism. But like I said, it has to be the right kind of capitalism. We should not, because the issue is that from 1947 to 1991, we were blindly emulating the Soviet Union with our economic policies and so on. We did not allow for the development of an internal domestic market. It was very, very shoddy sort of design. But at the same time, we did not fully embrace the Soviet model because, we were not a fully industrialized country like East Germany, which, by the way, came out of a war. It was completely destroyed. The Soviets took a lot of money and goods as reparations, and yet East Germany was the richest country in the Eastern Bloc. We could not do that because it was a deliberate decision that we use the Soviet economic model, but we use it for certain aims to ensure the feudal aristocracy remains intact. When after 1991, I think this development into free markets and deregulation, I think we went a little bit too far in our path in accepting, Reagan and Thatcher and all of these kind of ideologues. And I think that was, while it did give us a lot of growth, and I think, we owe our success to a certain degree to those beliefs, it has also led to the very inequality that we are criticizing in techno-feudalism with big tech in America. So I think the necessary thing is that if we want to safeguard our nation against the big tech feudalism from America, we need a strong state. If we want to develop capitalism and guide it towards national goals, we need a strong state. If we want industrialization, we need a strong state. The issue is that the very left of the Indian spectrum is very focused on going back to the days of 91, before 91, while the very right of the spectrum is focused on completely privatizing the economy. The answer is obviously in the middle, which is what we can see with Singapore, Taiwan, South Korea, Vietnam, and even China.
Yes, that's a very interesting point. And you're basically saying that for India to grow, it has to embrace capitalism. But how do you see these recent steps by the Modi government when it comes to farm laws, for example? What do you think is Modi government trying to achieve?
So I think the farm laws they have a lot of areas they can be reformed, in my view. But I think overall it is it's a good path to go forward with, because our farming sector needs to rid ourselves of these middlemen and inefficiencies. And I think this sort of farm laws can help create an environment for the markets to grow in our country. And I think it's good because it is being combined at the same time with, like I'm saying, the sort of state and market balance, because Modi is giving free electricity and direct water supply and all of that. It's helping the farmers in a lot of ways. And I think, I'm not saying the farm laws are completely, wonderful, great stuff. There are a lot of areas that can be reformed, regulated much better. But overall, I think it's a great thing to see, because the people, for example, who are protesting the farm laws, the most fervent supporters were the communists, which is very weird, because when it was Stalin, he was very much against these feudal middlemen and, these big farmers. But now the left in India is siding with these kulaks, as we call them in Russian.
But, there's one thing more which is happening in India as well, and also, especially in the Western countries, is that the inequality is widening, as you pointed out, and the socioeconomic mobility of the masses is going down. And it's pretty much evident in the data. I think in America, this is a generation which is worse off than the previous generation. Same thing we are also seeing in India somewhat. In India, there's lots of scope for improvement and expansion, but we're seeing the slowing down of socioeconomic mobility over the past few years. What do you think is the reason of this thing at the international level, and also at the America, and also at the level of India?
So for America, like I said, it's pretty evident that they... once they saw that the Soviet Union was not a threat, they realized they could, remove the welfare state, they could remove the industrial jobs, and they could just accumulate wealth and nobody would do anything about it. That was essentially what happened. 1979, and when the approachment with China began, they needed a bulwark against the Soviet Union. At the same time, they needed to offshore their industries, which were not very profitable anymore to be run in Western countries because of rising wages. So they needed to focus on financial capital and, fictitious capital, as it is called in many left-wing circles, which I agree with. So naturally, China was the best sort of spot for a communist country that hates the Soviet Union and a country that has cheap labor. Now, the thing with India is, I think, why we are not able to see the effects of what China had is because obviously we have an inequality that is exceptionally high. And especially during our so-called socialist era under the Congress Party, there was no effort done to either industrialize the country or to grant a strong welfare state. None of those two aims were achieved. And so essentially what we need is not only the expansion of a strong welfare state, and I think the coronavirus pandemic has shown us that we need a very strong public health service as well. What we also need is I am someone on the left, but it hurts me to say this. We need to end class conflict in India. It sounds very weird to my left-wing fans when I tell them, but the difference here is that India is a developing country. it needs capitalism. Like I said, it's one foot in feudalism and one foot in capitalism. If leftists want to achieve socialism, they must have both feet in capitalism for the conditions of socialism to arise. You cannot get socialism before you get capitalism, right? So what we need is the Indian businessmen, Indian businesses, to work together with Indian unions. They have to realize that they can get much more if they cooperate together. And this cooperation has to be taken care of by the state. Now, this is being done in China as well, where actually it is illegal to strike without government permission. And it is also being done in, for example, Singapore, where every year they have their basically there's only technically one legal union in Singapore, the National Trade Unions Congress, and they meet with the heads of big business and the state. Every year they look at workplace safety and wages and stuff. And Singapore has very low strike rates and a very friendly labor environment. If we want to have that in India, we have to realize that, even the sort of big businesses have to realize that they need the workers. They cannot be antagonistic towards workers. Unions must realize that if they wish to increase their own numbers, they need the jobs to be able to increase those numbers. And those jobs will come from more capitalism. So they both can see benefit. I mean, currently they're probably not seeing it, but they can see benefit. And this sort of convergence and mutual pact between the labor and capital and the state coordinating them is what can essentially give you your rise. This was being done in South Korea. Like I said, it is done in communist Vietnam. It is done in communist China. It is done in Singapore. It is even done in Germany. So these are examples of saying that if you collaborate, you can actually achieve growth very well. And this is the case because the state is focused on expanding the welfare state. But at the same time, we need to focus on guiding our nation towards more prosperity, which is where I see the role of the state coming in, as a sort of arbiter between capital and labor, while also creating an environment. For example, China has 5-year plans. South Korea had 5-year plans. Vietnam has 5-year plans. So there is a sort of vision of where you want to see the country going forward. And I think that thing is, in my view, a very good way of how we can achieve the goal and ensure that India can grow, because the issues we are facing is lack of state capacity, too much class conflict, and at the same time widening inequality. These three things are what is holding us back.
Interesting points, Alexei. We are running out of time, so my last question to you will be: is liberal democracy overrated?
Definitely, yes. I don't think there is anything great about liberal democracy that exists as of today. Surely, when it was challenging feudalism back in the day, liberal democracy was the cool thing to have, liberté, égalité, fraternité, and, liberty, equality, fraternity. Sounded good. It's now we are seeing the sort of conclusion of what it means for liberalism to exist. And it is the full atomization of individuals and at the same time, ability of capital to commoditize everything. Now, liberal democracy, especially in America, has become a sort of laundering operation for oligarchs, big tech, and defense, etc. Because for the last 40 years, Americans have elected people who have basically not done anything for them. There's more bailouts to these corporations, there's more money for big tech, but the people who vote, it doesn't matter. So what does it tell us? It tells us that these elections are basically a sort of way to manufacture consent for the government to say, okay, the people are fine with us, they're coming out to vote. It doesn't matter how they vote, they're voting for us. Both the parties are essentially the same. And it doesn't matter. If they're coming to vote, it legitimizes us. So in that sense, I'm not a fan of China. I don't want China-style regime in our country. Definitely, I don't want a one-party state. But I will have to give them respect for the fact that at least you can see who you have to criticize. If something goes wrong, you're like, blame the Communist Party official. Blame Xi Jinping. In America, you can't do that. Who are you going to blame? If you say, I blame Obama, next thing you know, some Republican who's going to come is going to do the exact same thing. And there's no other choice you have. So you either, step back and, accept your fate and, or you keep participating like an idiot. So liberal democracy, we can see in America, is turning out to be a sham. And it is its main principles, its constitutional principles that are good, for example, free speech, etc., they're not being applied to the very corporations that have bought out the liberal institutions in America.
Very interesting point, and this is a debate which we need to continue, Alexei, because even I think liberal democracy is not working that great in India. We're seeing in the state of Bengal. I mean, if you have literally goons who are killing the political opponents and they're being hailed as saviors of democracy, I think there's a total political breakdown in the liberal democratic framework. But Alexei, thanks a lot. And very interesting points. Some of them are very debatable, but certainly thought-provoking. We are running out of time, but I would love to have you again on my show some other day.
Definitely.
And thank you, audience, for listening to us. I'm sharing the Substack of Alexei. You can subscribe to it. You can read his articles. Also, subscribe to my channel as well, and also join as a member to support the channel. And thanks a lot for listening to us. Hoping to see you soon.